We have the CEO and founder of YouScience, Mr. Edson Barton. Wanted to kind of jump in and why? I always like to ask why. What was your journey and why does YouScience exist?
There's a lot of history there. A lot of founders, of course, of organizations are trying to solve a problem that was personally meaningful to them, and I'm no different.
How does this impact me and my future self? That's when it really makes a difference. And I think in having taught high schoolers for a decade, they're really questioning that.
And if you can make that connection between your personal future and what you're personally doing today, that's when an explosion of good happens. The aptitudes are fundamentally different. And when I came across this company, YouScience, I immediately recognized that they had done something different.
You're listening to the Disrupt Education Podcast. Here are your hosts, Peter Hostrawser and Alli Dahl.
Welcome to the Disrupt Education Podcast. Alli Dahl, I'm Peter Hostrawser. We've got a great one today. This is episode 4 of our series, partnering with YouScience. How are you doing, Alli?
I am doing so good. This is a pretty special episode that I know me and you have been waiting to have this conversation for a while. Someone pretty, important at YouScience is joining us. And before we introduce our guest, though, I did want to I was thinking about this episode, and I was thinking about a guest we had actually previously, Scott Carr, who really forced us to think about this question of what would you change if you knew your students more? And that question has just really hit my heart. And I think that that's going to come out in this conversation. And I was just thinking about when I was a teenager, there would have been no better time in my life for me to have had objective data that could have helped me prepare for my future. And it's something I wish I'd had, and something that I wish that wasn't just based on well, what do you like to do, Alli? Something that knew me more than just oh yeah, I like volleyball, or I like science, or I like to play card games, stuff like that. It didn't really, those types of questions aren't really the core of who I am. And so I just really was what would have changed if my teachers and my counselors and stuff knew me better back then? And I think that that's really what this series is getting at. And I think our conversation today is going to build off of it.
Absolutely. We have the CEO and founder of YouScience, Mr. Edson Barton. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on the show.
I really appreciate you just taking time out. I think it means a lot. And I know Jason Van Nuss, got to throw his name out there, speaks very highly of you and the entire platform. Wanted to kind of jump in and why? I always like to ask why. It's the old, what was your journey and why does YouScience exist? So that's a grand opening question, but I think as the CEO, I think you have an answer.
Well, it is a big one, and there's a lot of history there. A lot of founders, of course, of organizations are trying to solve a problem that was personally meaningful to them, and I'm no different in that case. I think for me, one of the ways that it started was I was one of those students who was not a good student. In fact, my mother always joked that Edson earned A's or D's, and mostly D's, and there was no in between. That's not entirely true, but it's pretty close. And I think for the most part, it was because I was, like so many students, I was disenfranchised with the education system. Again, like so many of us, we love to learn. We're born to learn. Gallup does some amazing research into the engagement level of students over time. And we all enter kindergarten and we're all at this high point of learning and just gathering information. And then somehow we keep beating it out of ourselves as we go along. And then, right around 6th grade, it just starts to drop like a rock. And by the time we get into high school, it's just miserable. It's at this low point, and over 66% of students are disengaged with their education. And I was one of those students. And I think that in those moments, one of the misperceptions that individuals have is that you're the only one. You're one of a billion out there, and you're the lone person. And I felt that way. And so, you move away from the things that can actually benefit you in your life. And I did that through education and through certainly my high school years. And it took a lot out of me because I knew that I was smart, right? And I believe that every student has genius, but I didn't know where to apply it, right? I didn't know what I was good at, right? Alli, I think your introduction there was a really important one because almost every student feels that way. And even the A students feel that way. One of the great research that's being done now is you track students over time, and those A-level students in high school, they get into college, they may earn A's throughout college, but then they graduate and they're just like, what do I do now? My life was school. It wasn't that they prepared themselves for life, they prepared themselves for school. And so this is really a universal question and a universal problem. And I was just kind of at the heart of it. As I started to grow and went through high school, I managed a couple of restaurants. While I was in high school, just a series of fortunate events there. And I ended up thinking through that period of time, that I was dropping out of high school effectively. I worked almost 80 hours a week my senior year. And so I'm there working in these restaurants, managing people that are older than me. I'm managing the books of the restaurant. I'm doing all the ordering. I'm doing all the repairs. I'm just, managing this restaurant. And all of a sudden it dawned on me, wait a second, maybe I am smarter than I really think I am, or maybe that the school system said I was. And that really triggered a change in me to say, I got to figure this out. Like, what's happening to me personally? And then as I learned, I realized, hey, this is happening to everybody. And then I started saying, this shouldn't be. We shouldn't be in this situation where almost every student feels like they're a failure at some point or for most of the time. So what is it that drives us to that? And so that started research through the different careers that I had and doing that. I ended up in a certification company. And as part of that, we represented Microsoft. And this was a key moment for me. We helped them run a survey and a study. And what they did is they placed a certification into a classroom. So in a high school classroom, this is over 25 years ago. And they wanted to see if it had any effect on the outcomes of students. And what they found is, yes, it did. And not only did it have an impact on students doing better in that particular class, but they measured it over time, and those students had less truancy problems. They had less disciplinary problems. They earned higher GPAs overall. And as they measured that over time, they saw that those students tended to enroll in college at higher rates. And those were kind of the limits of that study, but all of a sudden that triggered something. Wait, what happened there? That was one intervention. So what happened? And as I studied that and dug into it more and more, I found that the key to all of this was answering that age-old question, why am I learning this? That every student asks. And the answer that everybody is really searching for is, how is this going to impact my future life? Right? I'm a high school student, but that doesn't mean I'm stupid. It doesn't mean that I don't have passions, that I don't have desires, that I don't want to provide for myself in the future. But we tend to just say, do this as high school students and younger students, and everything will work out. Well, that's not the way we think, right? We are very self-interested individuals. And so we're sitting there thinking, how and why does this apply to my life? Whatever you're teaching me today. And once you make that connection to the workforce, to your future life, then all of a sudden everything starts to change. And it can't just be generalized. It can't just be, hey, go and focus on your career and you'll do better in life. It's, hey, how does this particular thing relate to me? And how does this personally relate to my future? And if you can make that connection between your personal future and what you're personally doing today, that's when an explosion of good happens. And today, I can confidently state that if you do what we call career connected learning, so if you focus on career connected learning, everything, and that's not an understatement there, everything changes for a student for the better. And all of a sudden you just see this whole host of benefits, not only to the individual, but to the system as well. So that's the background a little bit. That's why we're doing what we're doing. I'm here to change the world in dramatic ways. And we're on a mission to accomplish that. And it's paying off. We can prove it, and it's doing some amazing, amazing things.
That's what we call disrupt education, Alli.
I know. When I so think about this tool and how it is so much more than just something you put in your information, and it just like, it's not like a horoscope or something. Like, it's not predicting like next week. Like, it's helping shape your future. And I love what you said there with, like, if you can connect it personally, to you, how does this impact me and my future self? That's when it really makes a difference. And I think, in having taught high schoolers for a decade, they're really questioning that. And my own students, that where they could place the chemistry into what they wanted to do in the future, were always more engaged than those that didn't have like something outside of the game of school, right? Like, it feels like a game for a lot of students.
Yeah.
So what have you seen? YouScience has been around for a little while. This isn't like a company that started 2 years ago, right? You've been in ed tech for a long time. What have you seen in terms of, where YouScience started versus where it is now?
I think that evolution that I talked about, of finding out all of the science behind what motivates a student and individuals in general to achieve better things for themselves and really connect the pieces, has been the biggest thing. We started out, so I actually founded a company called Precision Exams. And we are a certification company. In 2020, we acquired YouScience, and it was 2 weeks right before COVID shut everything down in education. So it was good timing for that. But the reason why that we did that is I had seen those studies before. And so I was intrigued at how certifications and that connection to workforce could strengthen the understanding and the relationship of a student with their education. But one of the things that I knew was that certifications were the trailing indicator, if you will, of success, right? A certification's a test. It's the end of the education process. And while it had some derivative benefits, it was, how do we get more students into this world where they're taking advantage of these opportunities like certifications and other career connected learning to really benefit from those. So I started a search years and years ago to try to find better ways to guide students into these areas where they could thrive. I knew that if we could get them into career-oriented classes, that would benefit them. So how do we do it? And I have literally taken probably every different types of guidance program out there on the market. And while there's a lot of good that they do, unfortunately, they are very limited in their scope. And the science that they use is based on interest and personality surveys. And that becomes a key term there, is that they're surveys. And unfortunately, we've known in the psychometric world for a long time that those types of measures were actually harmful for guiding students towards careers, but they're universally used in the market today. And the main reason is because they're so simple to give off, and they take no time at all to do. But if I can, I'll just take a second on the difference between what that was and why they don't work if you use them just on their own, and then what I found in YouScience and why we needed to acquire it. With a interest-based survey, you are asking somebody what they think of themselves.
Mm.
So it's hard enough as an adult to know what we think of ourselves and who we truly are. But now you put that into a mind of a young person, right? A middle school student, a high school student, even a college student. And you say, I think you brought this up earlier, what do you like to do?
Mhm.
Well, I can only like the things that I've actually been exposed to. So there are a huge number of students that are totally disadvantaged in their exposure. Even those students who are the most exposed, right? They come from wealthy families, they have all the opportunities. They're even limited in what they know. In fact, I ask people all the time who are professionals, I say, name all the jobs that you can, that you know, and they tap out at 20 jobs. And so their worldview is still limited. So when you're asking a student an interest-based survey, or you're using an interest-based survey tool to understand guidance for that student in their life, you're just looking at a mirror of that student. And not only a mirror, it's actually a distorted mirror because you're asking them what they want out of themselves. And
Mm.
so, I ask students who do this, I'll work with them over time, the ones that are in my local area, and I just like to help them out personally. They'll go through an interest-based surf profile, and they'll catch themselves after I describe this scenario, and they'll say, "Oh yeah, I totally guided the tool to what I wanted it to be."
Mhm.
So I was working with a young man the other day, and I knew him personally, and he has these tremendous interests in the arts. He's very skilled that way. He has other things. And as we talked about the challenge of answering survey questions appropriately, he said, "Oh, I got it. I did that. Every time it asked me a question, I answered it in the way that would help me make the most money, not to who I truly was." And that happens all the time. So
Mhm.
interest-based survey questions, they'll ask you something like, do you like walking down city streets, or do you like walking in the mountains? Do you like coding on a computer? Do you like building cabinets? Do you like this? Do you like that? Right? And they'll just go back and forth. Again, well meaning, well suited, just it's unfortunately using a hammer when you need a saw. And you can see the problem. If I'm an inner city student and I've never walked in the mountains before, how would I ever know if I
Mhm.
like walking in the mountains? If I've never taken a coding class, or if I've had a bad experience with a coding class, how would I even know even if I had the talent for that? And so kids are directing themselves away from the economy and away from high paying, high wage, great jobs that they would be excellent at. And they're steering themselves to about 20% of jobs, but 80% of the students are guiding themselves to that 20% of jobs. Those
Mhm.
are psychology jobs, arts and entertainment, public safety, teaching, right? It's those types of jobs, things that they've been exposed to. So that creates a real problem. The other side of that is the aptitudes. And I know that you've talked to others, Jason and others, about that.
Mhm.
The aptitudes are fundamentally different. And when I came across this company, YouScience, and I saw what they were doing, they started in 2013. I started our company in 2006. And I immediately recognized that they had done something different. They had built this aptitude tool that is actually measuring who you are. It's not asking you what you think you are, it's measuring those things. And an aptitude is something you're born with, it doesn't change over time. It is your propensity to learn something. And so when we're actually able to grab that propensity to learn something and we can identify it for a student and help them recognize this is why you think this way, then we can point that towards a career that leverages those strengths. The student lights up. They're like, I had no idea that I could do that thing. I had no idea that I was talented in this area. Or I thought that I could have or should have done that, but all my friends were doing this. And so I was pulled in that direction. And that's why so many of us hate our jobs today, right? It's because we were pulled in a direction instead of really exploring who I was and then being led and choosing into those direction and those jobs that mean the most to me.
Those are two very key points, especially when you talk about interest-based and aptitude. Because I remember, and if anybody's like taken extensive notes on this podcast. I know I've said this before, but when I was a senior, actually when I was a freshman through my senior year of high school, I believe it was Indiana University had some students come and just ask like, where do you think you're going to college? What do you think you're going to do? And it was the same. It was interest, and I was giving them what I thought maybe was cool at the time.
Mhm.
And what's interesting as well is I do have a YouScience, and I did go through it. And we're going to go deeper into that in the next episode. But one of the things that I did notice was I started playing with the money. Ooh, I want to, and it was funny because most of the high, goes up to like half a mil or whatever, because that's you're just intrigued. And it was like, no, like those were not even close to what I would even consider myself doing. So it's funny how you brought that up because that's exactly how, as an internship coordinator, I am at the high school level. Yeah, a lot of students are getting paid, and I'm like, well, sometimes you're getting paid well, sometimes it's voluntary, and you have to work through that. We've also heard in our last episode, Montgomery County Educational Service Center out of Ohio doing some pretty interesting things. I wanted to ask you, so in your tenure so far with YouScience, how do you see what are maybe some stories or a story where districts, employers, or even states are using YouScience and you're like, wow, I had no idea it would do this.
I think one of the, intriguing that comes out of that Ohio area that you just mentioned, is what one of the colleges is doing there. So Sinclair Community College in that area, but they just happen to be a very large community college, 35,000 students. And they started leveraging the aptitude connections. And instead of just going and doing general career fairs or college fairs, and drawing students in just with general promises and swag, instead they really did a concerted effort to identify the students that have the aptitudes for the programs that they have at the college. And they went directly down to those schools, started meeting with those students personally, created a relationship with them, brought in industry to help, emphasize those things. They increased their enrollments with their feeder schools by over 48%.
Mm.
Now, that is unheard of, right? In a college situation with that type of population and with any type. I mean, that's just unheard of. But they had those tremendous successes because they were able to really identify the students, help them identify what they could really excel at, and show them the possibilities of what that meant to them. And they have tremendous success with those programs. It's just really one that jumps off the chart. I think on a different aspect, it goes not with the aptitude piece, but with certifications and this overall theme of connecting with your career. So we offer these certifications. We have over 220 certifications that we offer that are entry level to mid level. So they meet the needs of these students in these schools, not that they're built for high school students, but they meet those needs and they're working with industry. Well, Yakima School District in Washington State has made the connection between those certifications with their post-secondary partners and with the industries in their area. And they have saved families somewhere between $350,000 to $500,000 per year in college tuition costs by helping students earn these certifications in high school, connecting those to college credit in the colleges, and those are then connected directly to industry that needs those workers. What a tremendous benefit to all of everybody in that ecosystem, and students are eating that up. Families are eating that up. That's a lot of savings and a lot of benefit for a community that can be spent in other ways to benefit that community.
Hey everyone, this episode of Disrupt Education is powered by YouScience, and they're all about making every student connected and ready for what's next.
Yeah, if we really want students prepared for life after high school, they've got to connect what they're learning in the classroom to real careers.
Through aptitude discovery, industry recognized certifications, and real connections with employers, students start to see what's actually possible, not just what's on a checklist.
And let's not forget, for educators, YouScience gives us the tools to build those connections for every student at scale. scale. That's the foundation of a truly career-ready learner.
Check it out at uscience.com/disrupt education podcast.
AI is a pretty hot topic right now in education. And I'm sure YouScience, being an ed tech company, is not like has to be part of that conversation. And so how is YouScience, leveraging AI, trying to use it responsibly, and also, impact students even more than what you were doing before AI is like coming for all the technology?
Yeah. I'll maybe address it on two levels. First is the direct benefit to students, and then maybe the larger question or a different question of how is AI affecting careers and what does that mean for an individual who has to enter the workforce in this new age of AI. First, on how are we using it and how are we developing new tools? Well, one of the things that has always been a challenge is how do you present information to an individual that they can connect with personally? Now, I believe that we do a better job at it than most organizations. If you've gone through the tools, it sounds like you have, Peter, and you see the positive language we use, you see how it's written, and there's a lot of good connection for the student. But the student has to take time to read it. They have time, to ingest it and to consume it. And not every student takes that time, unfortunately. So the schools that are using it the very best, they're helping the students do that, taking the time with the students to explore these tools and what they have available to them. But not every school does it, unfortunately. So the one of the areas that we're really focused on is are we leveraging AI to serve up the content in new and fresh ways in the moment that the student needs and wants to ask about it. And that's one of the power and beauty of AI, is that you can do that. You can ask it in your way and you can get a response that's typically pretty awesome. And so we're building our structures and our responses and all this deep content that we know about individuals to serve up to them new and better ways to really digest that information. So as an example, one that I love is creating a podcast actually out of that. Using AI, it serves up, creates a little mini podcast. Well, that helps the student really see themselves in a different way. And so we've tested and played with that. It works out really great. But one of the neat things that we're excited about is sending that home to a parent, right? So it's one thing as a parent, we've all done this, right? You get these report cards, and you are expected to log in online through the SIS system. And a parent's overwhelmed with a lot of that stuff as well. They don't want to read a lot of stuff like that. And a lot of times it comes as kind of, educator gobbledygook. It's a different language that parents and families don't speak. So serving that information up in some new ways so that the families can interface with that content in fresh ways, more natural language, really is exciting to us in that case. And we've been playing around with it. We have some test cases, and it's just really starting to show and manifest itself in some exciting ways. So we'll be rolling more out that way in the future. So that's one of the areas that I think is really positive. A second area that's really positive is making the connections live and viable for this is where I am, this is where I want to go. How do I get there? Now, it's pretty easy to create a real linear path. We can do that just by building simple algorithms. But the next kind of evolution of that is, okay, I'm here where I am. I take one step forward. I take a class. I do a work-based learning activity. I do something. So my worldview now changes, right? I have more information now. So now based on that information, I can plug that into the AI system, and now my future can evolve with that change. Where before we had to stick to the linear path, but now I can have that evolve. And so that's super exciting to us as well. On the other front, like what happens with individuals who are being displaced by AI. And, I think everybody now is coming to grips with AI is impacting everyone's job. It's impacting my job. It's impacting your job.
Mhm.
So how do we deal with that? Well, one of the things that individuals inherently do is we attach ourselves to a label. And we do it in all sorts of ways. The wrong ways, we attach ourselves to race, we attach ourselves to other groups that we then fight with each other and do these things. But there are some other labels that we attach ourselves with. So one, for example, that a lot of students, you'll hear them say is, I'm not a math person.
Mm.
Or you'll hear the positive side of that. I'm a sports person. I'm a football person. I am a math person. I am a drama person, right? I'm an accountant. I'm a teacher. I'm a this. And while there's some value in that, but inherently that's not who you are. You're much more complex than this football player, this drama person, this teacher, this whatever. And so what aptitudes are able to do is boil down who you are to a more fundamental level and say, you're this complex individual, you're this amazing person that has these talents and these opportunities. How can those be applied to a whole bunch of different careers? Or even within a certain segment, how can you shift if AI takes this part of my job, which is probably an awesome thing that it's doing? How do my aptitudes allow me to shift what I do to another aspect of that job?
Mhm.
If I have inherently always attached myself that I'm this teacher, and so what I do is I develop lesson plans, but all of a sudden my lesson plans are all developed for me, right? That happens in a second now. Well, do I lose my identity? Or am I a deeper, more complex person? And I can take now who I am and shift it a little bit and now build a new career or a new aspect of my career that AI becomes a part and a partner with me rather than a replacement of me. And so I think that's one of the things I'm most excited about is as this new wave of AI has come about is to really help individuals understand that they're way more than what they thought they were. They're capable of so much more. And AI is not going to replace them because they have something more to give to the world and they can leverage that.
What you're saying, and like even the way you're speaking about AI, like with a tool, is you're really bringing this human connection point. And I will say so. Jason Van Nuss was kind enough to mention YouScience like back in May, and then he gave both Peter and I like the aptitude assessments. We both went through it, and then Jason took like an hour with me personally and like went through my results and like brought them to life. And I was thinking about this with, this discussion of AI is that you still need a human connection in like in education, in work, in all of our spaces. And so, but like if you can really understand the core of who you are and then like adapt around whatever technology is out there, you're not going to be fearful of it. And I think like I was just thinking about this human connection part, and that's ever since having that discussion with Jason and going through stuff, I was like, this has to be at the root of what YouScience does, because why would he spend, I mean, other than just Jason being awesome, but which we would all agree is true. Um, you know, there's there is a way to bring those things off the page that is so much more than like words on a page. Like we don't want things in education to just be words on a page, or like you're saying, if AI can help bring it to life so that people digest it, use it, and whatnot. But I am curious, like with users now, right? And as you're adapting this with AI, like how are you keeping that human, connection, human coaching there and encouraging it within a platform that you wouldn't necessarily need it, but is amplified by it?
I think that's a really great question because, I think one of the scary parts of AI is that we are now seeing that it can do almost everything that a human can do, right? In so many ways. But there is this personal nature of this that, it's not going to be able to do. How do I interact with this person that's sitting across from me? How do I take this person who, yes, has every capability through technology to learn and to do and to explore, but now how do I take that and put it into the real world? Right? How do I then take experience where, yes, AI can build in some ways that will have knowledge bases across, a greater depth of individuals than I will ever be able to have, but it can't put its arm around me, right? And it can't help encourage me in ways that make a difference for people. I get emotional about it because that's what's needed in our lives, right? We're missing connection in so many ways. In fact, all of what we're doing, whether it's through AI or our platform, our goal actually as a company is trying to build connection between people. And sometimes that's between the individual now and their teacher who's there in the classroom, or the person and their coworker or their classmate, the person and their next career. But all of that's about connection. And if we lose that connection piece, that's what starts to drive, humanity away from each other. So I am a person who actually believes very much that that will be kind of the new currency of the future is connection. And that the way that we build around that with each other will be really special. It will be different. It will be very different than what we understand today. But it has that capability to be something really marvelous that we haven't explored fully today because we haven't had the time to explore it in ways like we will be in the future. But that's how I view it. I think that it will be a tremendous value add. Teachers will evolve. They won't necessarily teach every subject, but they will be there to support the individual in new and beautiful ways.
Want to kind of go back to the podcast AI thing and then come back and retouch on the human skills and that. Yes to the podcast. Thank you. I have a senior in high school and I just get 4,000 different emails and half of them don't have to do anything with me. And then my phone goes off. I would, if somebody did that, think about that, Allie, like somebody
I
did that
know.
with my daughter and here's a podcast, 5 minutes, whatever, and just tells me, and has a conversation about that. Of course, we're a little bit like leaning towards podcasts. We're our podcasters, but I love that idea. Keep going with that. The other piece was what, bringing up those skills, that currency of the human aspect and connection is so spot on. We just had, and I know I've talked about this on our previous series, but we just had this our mock interviews, and every single one of the interviewers, we all would hang out after the students would go on to their next course or whatnot, said that is the currency. Everybody was talking about AI and what is the education system doing? Because everybody's trying to figure out what's going on. You're spot on there in industry. So that's where I want to shift gears. And so we've talked a lot about the education process, and we've talked about like how YouScience is helping schools and young people and old people. I'll throw that out there. It helped me understand myself even at my seasoned age. I'll keep that there. But let's talk about industry, right? So how is it really now building those bridges? You mentioned in Washington there are some stackable like skills or credentials that community is using and connecting with what's on the platform and what's going on into that community. But can you just unpack a little bit about what is industry looking at here? And there's definitely, I know there's talent pipeline happening here.
Yeah, I think as you look at industry from that aspect, and as we mentioned before, everything that we do is trying to help an individual connect with their future, right? That's what creates all those benefits for an individual. Well, the natural and nice side of that is that it's not one-sided. It actually creates a whole host of benefits, and the other side of that is for industry, for employers, for that side. So as I know you know, and is well documented in newspaper articles every single day, uh, our economy is really suffering because of the lack of workers. And I say lack of workers because that's the way it's reported on a lot. Economists have actually said that we actually don't have a lack of workers. We have a lack of people working in the right jobs.
Mm.
And or therefore they take themselves out of the workforce a lot of times. I mean, that's a huge issue in a lot of states right now, is the non-participation rate in the workforce, because people are just like, I don't like anything, right? It doesn't fulfill me. I'd much rather sit at home and not do anything. And that's a problem for all of us. There's a whole host of reasons why that's a problem, but when you look at it from an employer standpoint, they are losing revenue, which makes it sound like, well, it's just all about them. Well, that revenue typically goes to hiring more people, that goes to then supporting our economies, that go to, helping each one of us buy the hamburger at the next stand, that then feeds another family in different ways, right? So we're all connected through this. So our platform is actually, we call it Bright Path. And YouScience, the aptitude, YouScience is the company now. We changed our name to YouScience, by the way, from Precision Exams. But there are different parts. So the discovery, the aptitude and career discovery is a part of that. There's a career planning section and a course planning section for your graduation. There's a connection piece to employers in that. There's a work-based learning tool. All of the pieces within BrightPath are built for a pedagogically correct sequence of systems and processes to move a student along to help them connect to that industry partner. And again, it creates that benefit for the student because they know why they're there. They have a goal. They can build that. For industry, there is a barrier between industry and education. And education has built that over time. And it hasn't been a real positive thing. There are reasons why it's been built. And so there are some positives there. We don't want just everybody bombarding our students, especially when they're young. But there is something that's missing. If we remove career out of an education system, students, are just floundering. They don't know why they're there.
Yep.
So we have to bring career back into it. And again, it has to be personal. And part of that personal part of it is it has to connect to something real. It can't just be, oh, I've been told that I should be an engineer. That's awesome. I didn't know that before. That has an impact. But now what do I do with that? Who do I connect with again? So that real connection with industry has to come in. For industry, the problem is this barrier that's been placed in there is now they don't know how to talk to education. They don't know how to talk to students in the way that they need to coordinate with education. So one of the things that we've really focused on is that communication between the two sides. And part of that, a great way to do that is through standards, but businesses don't talk standards like we do in education, right? Like education standards. But what they do talk about is job descriptions and tasks and things like that. So one of the areas that's really critical in all of this is that certification piece, because the certification is one of your best bridges between what's taught in the classroom, standards, then what industry values, a certification, which is validation of knowledge and skills, right? So if you can get those two sides to connect through those standards, through the certifications, now all of a sudden you're starting to build bridges. That also gives educators a great reason to communicate with the outside world, if you will, with businesses. Is now they're saying, okay, we now know we have something concrete that we have to offer, not just this theoretical diploma or education. We have something concrete. And that gives us a reason to reach out to a specific company and say, do you value this? Would you value this? What don't you value about this, these standards, this certification? And so then businesses can give more direct feedback, right? Instead of just, I think you're probably involved in some of these, but, You have every school district in the country has been mandated through federal and local laws to have advisory boards of local, businesses and things like that. Well, what happens in most of those advisory board meetings is this: the educators will stand up and say, "Thank you for coming. We're grateful you're all here. What do you need?" And it's this open question, and businesses are sitting there thinking, I don't even know how to answer that. Can't you just get kids that can show up on time is what the common answer is, right? Because they don't know what else to say. But now if an educator can say, hey, look, we've got these set of standards here, and they're not just about math, right? Which is important, but it's applied math now, right? It's how is the student in this construction class using math? That becomes important. That's what an employer needs to know, right? Or chemistry or whatever it is. So it's now relevant to the employer. So you can hand those standards documents to them and say, would you evaluate these for us? This is what we think you need. Tell us if we're right on that.
Yeah.
And now there's this connection that can happen in just really significant ways. And so, I mentioned a lot of things there, but the end goal there is to create that connection again and bring those two sides together closer and closer, so that now both sides can start to support each other and help each other in really meaningful and direct ways.
I think you just described a lot of my Workforce Innovation Council meetings.
Unfortunately, it's true.
Yeah, no, it's
so
spot
many of
on.
them. It's hard, right?
Spot on.
It's
Well, and
important to have.
educators too. Sorry, educators they didn't go to school to learn how to communicate with that, right? That's not
Right.
what they did, so they don't know how to do it.
Unless those very few of us who went into industry and then bounced into education.
That's
So
right.
you know the difference.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very much so.
Right. You need translators. Like Christy Valesky says that very same thing, right? Like but that's where like a tool can translate more than an individual person, or the tool can help an individual person do more. And that's really important. So we're really interested in the future of YouScience, like where you can put on your visionary hat. I'm sure as a CEO you have to have that. And like what would you see, like if you could fast forward a couple of years, is some things you'd like for YouScience to do, or what does success look like for YouScience with students, with communities, with industry? What does that look like for you?
The reality is that, or my reality is that I believe that our tools are needed for every single student. So we are driving, our goal is to get it into the hands of every single student, every adult that needs it as well. But how do we do that and drive it to that end? So that's really what we're driving towards. How do we do that? We're still figuring some of that out. We've got some new avenues. We're doing new things all the time, but that's what we're focused on. As that becomes more and more of a reality, I mean, we're doing it with millions of kids and students and adults as well right now, but we've got to get it in the hands of everybody. As part of that, then what do I see? Like, what's the future that helps evolve? Well, one of the challenges right now, if you think about the school systems that we have, as a student goes through elementary into really elementary, then into middle and junior high, there's like this drop off. So you have students, and then there's really almost no communication between that elementary level and the middle school, junior high level. Then from the junior high, middle school level, there's almost this, again, a complete drop off, and now everybody starts again. It's worse as it gets to at the end of graduation from high school. And the way that I like to think of it is you've got this group of students, you got 100% of the students, let's say, and they're getting to that graduation point. And unfortunately, we know that that's not 100% because we're losing students before, but well, just for sake of argument, what happens is they get to graduation and it's like a filter, and they're coming and they hit this filter, and you got this whole group that's coming through. They hit this filter, and that filter spreads them to the wind. But what happens then is that everybody after high school, so post-secondary life, whatever that means for them, they have to find each other. They have to connect. They have to understand what everybody wants, but they can't do it now through a consolidated system that's really there to benefit the student, to help them connect with those people or those groups. And they have to find each other. That creates an enormous amount of inefficiency and waste. But the biggest part of that inefficiency of waste is the human capital waste. Because I graduate from high school, I have these life plans in front of me, and I get out of high school, I hit that filter, and I'm now left to myself, which in some ways is a beautiful thing, but in other ways, it's this really lonely thing. And I've got to try to figure it out. And sometimes my family can help me, sometimes they can't, right? We know that more families can't than can. And so I have to try to figure out how to get to that next stage of life. And we're losing, right? Sometimes by choice, but we're losing 35% of our students before they get to some type of post-secondary education experience. And we're losing 15% in high school, 35% as they graduate from high school. So only 50% roughly of students are going on to post-secondary. Well, in today's world, we need 100% of students to go to post-secondary. Now, it doesn't have to be, 4-year college. There's a whole host of post-secondary options, but we need lifelong learning. We need that connection to what I'm going to do in the future and how is the future evolving. And post-secondary education provides a lot of that, but we're losing 50% of the population. That's what economists are saying. We have the population, we just don't have them all going to the right things. Then when they get into college, we throw those students right back into general education courses if we get there, and then we lose another 50% of those kids. But the other thing is businesses are on the other side, and they're trying to find these students. And that's where you see now they are such a desperate need of people to work with them. They're putting up billboards, for heaven's sakes, right? The days of advertisements in the newspaper or even online and Indeed are gone because they're ineffective, because that connection has been lost. So what are we really looking at in the future is building this pipeline for both sides of that equation to be more efficient and effective with each other. I am a person who believes that we undervalue human potential as a society, especially in the United States. We have, and I'll give you a quick example. My father, one generation from me, he grew up on a farm, and he was driving a truck, an old-fashioned truck with stick shift, right, and clunky. He was driving that at 10 years old. He drove a team of horses at 10. He was helping run a mill at 12, right? He was capable of doing things. And I think, all of us probably have people in our lives who can fix things, right? It was everybody. They just knew how to do things. And today, I don't know how to do those things. And part of that is because I was told when I was young, I got to wait till college to learn what I really need to know. I got to wait. I was told when I entered my undergraduate with my counselor, literally, I was told this. I asked them, they asked me, what do you think you're going to do? And I said, well, I'm not sure, but I think I want to go on to MBA school or a law degree. And they said, quote, oh, good, then you can take any degree you want because they're going to teach you what you need to know when you get to your MBA program. That told me right there that my education was worthless, right? And that's unfortunately what we're also telling our kids in high school. We're telling them you've got to go to college because you're not learning anything important here, and you're only going to learn it when you go to college. That's the wrong message, right? We need to be telling our kids you're capable. You can do amazing, amazing things. And when you do those amazing things, we're going to connect you to somebody who values that thing, and they're going to tell you how important you are. That's what companies do. They tell us that we have value in society. Right? We don't need them to tell us that, but that's part of that role, right? Is we go to school to get value so that we can contribute to society. And if we break that connection, we are telling everybody in the education system, you're not as valuable as you thought. Kids are graduating. There are story after story after story right now of college students who are graduating, coming into the workforce, and they have no idea what they're going to do. None.
Mm-hmm.
On the other side, we have this huge population of businesses saying, we need more workers. We need people with skills. And they're not connected to each other. And I know that the kids have skills. You mentioned, Peter, earlier about, this example of me at my college. One of my programs that I took or that I had to do was one of my capstones. It was the most intense work experience that I've ever experienced in my life. And I never told anybody about that experience because nobody asked.
Yeah.
Right. And it wasn't work. It was school. It was something else. And yet that was so valuable to me. I learned more there. And so anyway, we got the future here is to connect everybody together, make that pipeline efficient, get rid of this filtering system that's there, and make better, direct, faster connections and tell people how important they are. There's no reason why kids in high school can't be doing complex jobs of the future. We can. We're not allowing it to happen the way that it needs to.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Edson, for being with us. It's not every day you really understand, like an educational technology company saying, look, it's not the future alone. We have to humanize readiness. And I like from beginning to end, that has been the vision, and is really personalizing learning and understanding the human aspect of it, and then communicating it with each other. I see it every day in classrooms, in our internship programs. I'm just so elated that you got to share your story with us today. YouScience is amazing. And guess what we're going to do next week, Alli? We are actually going to go to one of those college students who are struggling at the end of their 4-year, who has graduated, and we're going to have Jason walk us through it. So I'm very excited about that episode, so we can actually see it. I know Alli and I have actually gone through the aptitude test. Not the test, it's not even a survey. It's almost gamifying. It's so awesome. I really like that. But Edson, again, thank you so much for hanging out with us on the Disrupt Education podcast today. It's been amazing hearing these stories.
Well, thank you both. It's been a pleasure to be here with you, and I appreciate what you're doing.
So for Alli Dahl, I'm Peter Hostrawser. We'll catch you next week, and you don't want to miss this one either. We're still partnering with YouScience, and we're going to walk through this whole platform. It's going to be very interesting. So we'll catch you next week. Thank you so much for listening. That's another episode of the Disrupt Education podcast, where we keep challenging the traditional systems and helping students connect learning to real life. Here's the truth. Many students leave high school with a diploma, but without direction. Readiness isn't just about grades and transcripts. It's about discovering who you are and connecting that to real opportunities. That's why Disrupt Education is proud to partner with YouScience, the platform that helps every student uncover their unique strengths, explore career pathways, and step confidently into the world beyond school. If you believe that every student deserves to be connected and ready for what's next, check out uscience.com/disrupt education-podcast. Because when education and purpose connect, students don't just graduate, they launch.